Awesome. How are you
Hi,
guys? Good?
Michael.
You doing
Hi.
Yeah, great.
awesome? Awesome. So because we're really tight on time today, we're going to really just jump into the fire. And I want to ask, each of you so generously gave of your time and energy to this program freely. What led you to do so? We'll start with Polly.
Oh, gosh. Well, first, let me say, Jelani, I was happy to be a panelist, but listening to um, Daryl and Kwaku and the boys talking about what an ally is, I'm almost teary honored to have been included. So thank you very much. You said something, I can't even remember who said it, but maybe it was Daryl. He said, we live in color. That's our lives. And it made me realize, I had a pat answer to give you, but it made me realize that I've spent my whole life thriving in colors. I don't do well in black and white situations. I'm not a linear. So for me, especially after coming out of New York for 25 years, where I was a big sister to in a program with Grand Wyndham, and did a lot of work in New York because I've always said that it's easy to see God in New York because there's so many things to do and ways to be needed. But I don't think I joined ABC to do charity work. I joined it to add color to my life. It's what I hate to say it, but it's a selfish thing. I get so much and it gives me so much color to share with the world.
But that's because that's your lifestyle, right? Your lifestyle is to share points of view that are other than your own, and to circle yourself around that. And I think that's the lifestyle that we all need to kind of apply more, is to surround ourselves constantly with color. Awesome. Michael, we'll go to you.
Sure, I always get to follow Polly. If you didn't give us the questions ahead of time, I think we probably all struggle more than we were going to, but we will struggle nonetheless, because then you hear something interesting or particularly thoughtful from one of the other people. My sort of pat answer was kind of the way I was raised and educated. So I had a lot of Jesuit training, and the thing that they reinforced, and back in the day when they used to beat it into you, but they would make it clear that you were there for other people, right? So they have a phrase which is men and women for and with others. And you're supposed to be walking this journey through life with other people, and not just by yourself, or not just with the people in your immediate family. So it's really not specifically religious, but spiritual alignment with that thought process that really brought me to doing some of the things with ABC. And a little bit like Polly, but I grew up in New York City, so New Canaan, was too white for me, which, given how white I am, is hard to actually believe. But I needed more, and I wanted more, and wanted more for my kids as well, because it's a big world out there. And when you limit yourself to one thing, whether that's race, religion, creed, color, gender, you're limiting yourself.
I love that. I love that. And Caroline, how about you?
Hey, growing up in New Canaan, I had the opportunity to interact with ABC students, both in classes and in school, but then especially through youth group, and hearing from scholars both the richness and the gifts of the program, but also the challenges stayed with me. And so I went to school and was an education major, and that was my training. And so in coming back to the area, tutoring felt like a great fit. I could bring a gift of mine to the house and to the program, but also be in relationship. And I think other panelists have said it well, Polly and Michael, that being in relationship, that there's this richness in community. And so being a tutor and living in the house and working with the scholars enriched my life. And it was a gift to me to be able to tutor. But it was something that probably was planted back when I was in high school, and I got to brush shoulders and rub up against these really great young men that otherwise wouldn't have been part of my life were it not for ABC.
So it's interesting that each of you have said that the seeds of this began so early in your life, right? So it's like it's there's a musical called Into the Woods, and it says like, careful the things you say, children will listen, right? And it sounds to me as if from an early age, the act of service, the act of giving, the act of selflessness was something that was kind of put into you through your parents, or through, as Michael, you said, a religious experience, or as Polly said, as just the way you chose to live your life and who you surrounded your life with. And I think it's important that we understand that these things are taught, right? Like service is an act that is taught. It's not an act that, and racism is an act that is taught as well. And so I appreciate that your upbringings led you to the ABC program, that there was a place to match your service, to match your need or want of service. Michael Curran, you were a host dad, a former board member, and a president of the program. That's 3 major pillars. Can you give us some insight into how the program is run?
Sure. One thing I'd point out is the program evolves over time. So it goes back 46 years, and some things are consistent. The mission has remained the same, but the people change, the students change, what we're trying to do, what's going on in society around us changes. But I think the primary thing that people, and some of the alums have talked about this, there's a house. And the house is where everyone is based, where they live through the school year when they're not with their host parents. And at times it's probably, one of the things, and this is true for, I know the RDs who have been through the program and other board members, because I've spoken to people since some of these videos have started. It's been disturbing to us that at points in time, the house has not been a sanctuary for the students. And it's varied, weirdly between what floor we're on, or who's in the house, or things like that. And figuring out how to get that pitch point right is really hard. Saying, well, gee, nobody's going to come into the house. Well, one thing you want to know about is how, if you're donating money, what are you donating money to? There's a house, there's a program, there are students.
So just to be clear, I just want to be clear that everyone knows that the program is run 100% on donations.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. But one of the things that again, and some of this is, the guys are still processing things, right? Some people are processing their experiences. In some cases, 5 years later, some cases 20 years later, but it's still processing it. But one of the things that I don't think is not on topic, but I apologize. I think it's important. I don't know that everybody who's been through the program gets how great most of them are. There's some guys who don't work out for a variety of reasons. It's not a good fit. They don't want to be there. Their parents don't want to be there. We're actually host parents twice, by the way. Our first guy left. His family relocated to North Carolina. So it doesn't always work out. But people like you guys. Like you're chosen for a reason, right? You went through a screening process. Somebody, I think it might have been Devon, said, I don't want anybody to think we were given, that when people think we were given something. No, you earned it. The cutoffs for getting into the program were high. The recruiting process is a pain in the neck. The application is ridiculous. It's longer than a college application by far, et cetera. And then you have high standards when you're in the house that you have to live up to, including the no drugs, alcohol rules that people talked about. So it's a pretty impressive group of guys. And people want to spend time with them. And maybe they want to spend time with them because they don't know people like them. And that may be part of it. But even if they did know people, even if this was a town that was majority people of color, it's still an exceptional group of guys who were chosen out of other things to be in this program. And I don't know that they've processed that. I don't know whether you've processed that, but I know calling something elite is kind of a negative, almost a bad thing to say. But you guys are an elite. You're special. You met standards to get into it. You exceeded standards to get out of it, and you impressed people along the way. So that's not how the programs run, but that's why the programs run,
Mhm.
by the way.
But do you think that there should be a sort of balance in understanding that yes, these are really, really talented students and really talented young men, and you know, in many cases, very handsome and smart and hi. But do you also think that there's space to be fetishized a bit, you know, because it's like, you know, these are the most shiny apples of representations of color that you could find to bring to this community. How do you make sure that they're still teenage boys and they're still understanding their development, that you don't kind of hinder that by exposing them so widely and so kind of openly to just random anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hardest part. I mean, one of the questions that you had sent out ahead of time is what the challenges are with the program. I think the key challenge is balance, right? And you're probably never going to get the balance right. You're striving to get towards something. So there's some guys who really want more exposure. There's some guys who are quiet. You know, if you saw, as I'm sure you did, Kwaku's videos, Kwaku himself and some other guys said one of the ways they dealt with it is to withdraw, to go inside themselves. Well, in those kinds of situations, if you then shine a bigger light on them and expose them to more people, you're not helping them, at least near term, you're not helping them. And there are other guys who they loved it and they wanted more of it, and give me more exposure or let me do more things. So you got to get that balance right. I think what I didn't realize, and the videos were helpful in understanding, is when we didn't get the balance right, how negative that was. Right? How traumatic it was for some of the guys when, however fine that tipping point was, once you went over it, it was bad. And that's hard to know where that is, because you don't pressure people at all. You don't give many challenges. You don't give many hurdles to go over. They're not going to develop either. So you have to have something.
But what kind of, you know, tell us more about, like, in terms of, if we go through the year of the ABC program, right? What is the like structure of the year in terms of like helping the program, talk about, maybe tell us about the fundraiser, things like that happen throughout the year.
Maybe Polly, Polly actually ran the fundraiser a couple of times.
Polly, yeah. Would you like to talk?
Polly jump in and
you're on mute.
I was trying to be kind. What I was going to say is I ran development, and I worked under Chip Perkins as president, Melinda Fager as president, Melanie Berman as president, Jim Slattery as president, and left just as soon as I heard Mike was coming in, I got out. No, Mike and I worked together too. So I have a perspective of many years, not just of being, I wasn't just a board person. I was in charge of making sure that the community knew enough about Future 5 and bringing it to life. Couple things. What I want to say about the different presidents and the organization, I've loved all weekend the suggestions. I think the boys had great suggestions, and it would be good to download after with the key people and talk about what could take place. But one thing that's really, I would say, the most important thing, and something we've paid a lot of attention to, but not as proactively as we have, that really is the essence of the whole program. It isn't the presidents, it's not the board, it's not the host families, it's the RDs. And I have been there through 4 different sets of RDs, and I can tell you, and I had Ellen Berube living with me when she was a tutor living at the ABC house. So I really have the inside track on some of that. And I think so much of what the boys were talking about, and upstairs, downstairs, and whatever, is that if I was to look back, is I would say that we should be working even harder to bring in someone with youth development skill. Like, now that I'm at Future 5 and know what it really takes, I think there could be, instead of, oh, we're so lucky these 2 people said they'd live there, is to really go through the process, maybe put a budget against it, which we never have. Because it occurs to me when I think back, and I drove many boys to therapy, I took kids to tutoring, I raised money. What really, when you have RDs that get you, and you're not tiptoeing around them, or you're not scared of them or whatever. Not that Mike's not right. I like standards. I like that part of the program's tough, sorry. But I do think if there was anything we could look at as a town, it would be to set up even more stringent and with more knowledge of who we're bringing in to run. It's like finding the best camp counselor. So that would be my suggestion.
Beautiful.
I didn't tell you about if you want development, I'll talk about that too, but.
No, we can move on to our next question because of the sake of time.
Yeah.
What have been some of the challenges meeting the needs of the house? Maybe Caroline, do you want to talk about that from like an outsider who, you know, though you've not been on the board, you have been involved in the program? Want to talk about that?
Sure. I think in some ways meeting the needs of the boys in the house is meeting the needs of, in some ways, any teenager, right? That we're talking about young men who've got interests and got gifts and have a lot of demands on their time. And then there's a very specific experience that you're going through that as a tutor, I thought I was understanding and meeting, and probably looking back, realizing I was missing stuff, right? I was hitting this academic piece, and there's so many really wonderful adults involved in the lives of the house, but I think we're all hitting one small thing. And is there an overarching? Is it the RD piece that it's going to better encompass all the needs and catch all the small things? I remember, you know, one year y'all were studying for the SATs and getting up to take the test, and I said, well, who's going to take you? And it was Saturday morning, and it wasn't exactly this person's job, and it wasn't exactly this person's job, and suddenly it was like, who's going to take them and make sure they have breakfast and are ready to roll and take this exam? So I think that's a practical kind of nitty-gritty need. And then there's this, it's been brought up and named, and now we need to really look at this huge emotional and psychological and maybe even I would call it a spiritual need that we're not exactly addressing because it's no one's job per se, right? And it's to talk to and unpack and address the trauma, I think at times of being young men of color in a town like New Canaan, of just being teenagers. I think there's all the regular teenage stuff, and then it's complicated and it's exacerbated by not being home. And so I think those are some of the challenges. I also think that, you know, we bring in a lot of amazing adults who are driving and volunteering to do meals and to be host parents. And I bet some of you are getting training. I didn't get a ton of training about, you know, implicit bias or even some like safe conduct training. Some of that has been evolving over time. But how are we really making sure that we are putting the best, just like Polly said, the best and the most trained and the best
Most equipped, yeah.
Exactly. And I think looking back, after hearing your definitions of an ally, I think I was at times a friend, but I'm not sure I was always an ally. And I'm growing that muscle now, and I want to be. But as a young tutor, I think, especially coming out of New Canaan, I was conflict avoidant. Being good for me was not ruffling feathers, was not addressing things head on all the time, was trying to, you know, smooth over and maintain the status quo. And I think that's a training that adults surrounding the program should go through. I mean, ideally, this should be part of our school system so that we have arming tons of allies and tons of peers for these young men, but definitely all the adults who do have power, even though we don't always know it.
You know, I just want to throw in, you know, who was an ally, but really changed the house and brought a lot to it is, and I don't know how many years she was there, but Beth Jones, when she came in to cook,
Agreed.
it was life-changing. The boy, she was a non-judgmental, fabulous cook who listened to the boys. And that's when I talk about RDs, the culture of the house shifted under Beth. I don't know if she knows how great she was, but I could tell.
And we
Still
tell
there.
her all the time. We tell her all the time that she really is a person. She listens. You know, she's a voice that's not directly in power to say. You know what I mean? And she's also not a high school. She's actually like the one person in the house that is like other, that we can just say, hey, this is happening. And I'm curious if there can be another person in the house who is other but person of color. You know. Paula, can you talk to us about the financial needs of the program and how that's often met or not met? I know that is something that is critical to the survival of the program.
Well, and that's what's made New Canaan so successful. When I came in, I got married, moved, I was 50 years old. I married my husband for the first time, moved to New Canaan, and my brother was the president of ABC. And they had a little, you probably don't even know this, Jelani, but they had a little, it was Jazz in June event, a Jazz in June event. And I think that they would raise like $70,000 or $80,000, and that was the big deal. And I had been a fundraiser in New York, so my brother's like, you've got to come in here. And along with Missy Godfrey and so many people in New Canaan, we took from Jazz in June to creating a real fundraiser. Our budget, I don't know what it is now, but it was around $300,000 to maintain the house. And that's after special things, capital campaigns, which we did under Slattery, you know, putting roofs on or things like that. But it's about $300,000. In the old days, we would do one fundraiser, and under Melinda Fager, when we had our 35th anniversary and we brought in a Beatles band and moved it to the club after years of, Jelani, I don't know if you remember, setting up the tables out at Grace Farm, etc. We raised a lot of money. ABC has always been fiscally responsible. They not only did we raise a lot, but we would put money away for a rainy. We were always set so that we could run ABC with at least a year or 2 years ahead.
What was the attendance like for some of these fundraisers?
Well, it was huge. This is what I want to say. So fundraising, I've been involved with fundraising, a lot of different things. I'm getting to attendance. It is one thing to raise funds for a hospital in your town, for the school in your town, for the library in your town. But if you think it's very easy to raise, not easy, but it's easier to raise money for a prep school or a college. ABC has 8 boys. 8 boys. How many families do they touch? If you give money, it doesn't really affect you. You are truly giving money for someone else. You think it's a good thing for your town, but it's not like a hospital or a gym you're going to use. So raising money for an ABC house, there has to be pride in the town. And with Diane Netzger, we started PR, and we got a lot of good PR. And as ABC was written about, the boys may not like it, but as they allowed us to write about them being in a play, doing a car wash, all those things, more people in the town started to have a better feeling. So we went from raising $90,000 to netting $225,000 at just that one event. Since then, they haven't been doing as many big events, and I'm not exactly sure how we raised the money, but I do want to say Susan Connolly is amazing, and once again, Donnelly is amazing. Excuse me, mixed up my friends. And she has started. It's always about getting the stories out first. People will give when it connects to them. So if you think about 8 boys and 8 host families, that's a very small audience. So mailings and events are important, but ABC has always, New Canaan has always kept it in good fiscal shape, and I'm sure it is today. Susan Donnelly's been amazing.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's been some bumpy roads too, but you're talking about, I want to highlight something you said. It's, giving without kind of knowing that it's going to directly affect you.
It's
and
hard to ask.
That actually is what giving up privilege is actually really all about, right? It's actually saying, and in our current time, in our current society, I said in my New York Times article that I wrote about Broadway and about the theater that right now it's not going to feel like sharing. It's going to feel like actually giving. You have to actually giving something of yourself and to something else for it then to be equitable. And I think what I really would love to see from the community of New Canaan is more ways that they can give. And this brings me to my next question. How would you define charity? What would you define charity to be, particularly in regards to the ABC House? How about you, Michael? We'll start there.
So just one follow-up on what Polly said. Being board president, you get to meet the other people running CSPs in the rest of the country, many of them in Connecticut. And they were shocked at how well supported the New Canaan program is, was and is. Best funded program in the country by far. So whatever challenges we have had have not been fundraising. The town has been economically very supportive. But you raise a good point of, what does charity mean and what do you give? And So, like a well-trained young man, I went and researched what types of charities, exist. And of course you find out first thing on the net is how to avoid a charity scam, which ABC is not. So that's not easy. But there are different types of charity. And, giving money is the easiest part. So when you say is it charitable? Yeah, sort of. But there's a big distinction between someone who writes a check for $100 just because you sent them something and, hopefully you leave me alone, versus someone who writes a big check, or someone who says, I'd like to get involved. And I think what we've found over a long period of time is most of the people who want to support the program economically in a serious way do so through involvement first. So they join the board, they get involved, they see what's going on, they see the guys, and then they step up financially. It's not necessarily the reverse. And I think that's true in a lot of things. People join become a volunteer at a hospital or, something at a school, et cetera, and you see what that group is doing and is doing good things. So money is easy. Time is a little harder. Energy and passion and compassion are the hardest, right? So I can write a check, I can spend some time, but do I get what's going on? Do I really care about it? Am I really putting those people who I'm working with, their needs ahead of mine? So then you get to the highest level, which is altruism, and who gets there, and how hard is that? Because one of the guys said on your last panel about on being an ally is putting my best interest first. Well, good luck with that most of the time, right? We're human beings. We put our own interests first for the most part, and when we don't, that's a great thing. But let's face it, it's hard enough getting through most people's lives on any given day. Then you add COVID, or you add a job, or you add a relationship that's gone bad, or health issues. So when you actually try and put someone else first and ahead of you, it's really, really hard. And getting to that level is sort of a pinnacle, a Zen master of something, of charity. And I don't think most of us get there most of the time. It's a pretty high hurdle. But I think it's one that we can sort of strive towards. You and I talked previously about what's not charity. And one of the things that people sometimes think they're doing good, the National Charity League in town, a lot of the people would bake cookies and cupcakes and brownies and bring them over. And it got to the point where I think the guys in the house were like, stop bringing me this stuff. And the RDs got to the point of we're having a hard time feeding these guys correctly, and you just dropped off 4 dozen, brownies or something like that. And should you feel good about baking a bunch of brownies and dropping them off? And there's something performative about that. So there are different ways you can get involved. And I mentioned to you, one of the things that some people have done is they've come over and helped out physically, on the fall and spring cleanup days, which the guys hate. It's one of their least favorite things ever to do. But if somebody comes over, one of the guy's girlfriends came over one day for one of those days, and I thought, man, that's a girlfriend. She's willing to spend 4 hours raking and digging up stuff. And mind you, we won't mention who it was, but he went in and hid for half the time anyway. So
but I also think it's a difficult balance of it being a charitable organization and then seeing the boys as quote unquote charity. Does that make sense? I think it's a great.
Well, yeah, but that's really on the giver more than the receiver, right?
Okay. Yes,
so,
I agree with you.
So for the guys to feel bad, I don't feel bad about someone else misbehaving. That's on them, or some, and that's not misbehaving. It's just maybe not having the right mindset about it. But it troubles me that guys felt bad when people, you shouldn't feel like you're a charity case in any way, shape, or form, either as an individual or as the program. But it's really more on the people who are doing something to not behave in a way that happens.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance. Caroline, I'm going to jump to you as we only have 10 minutes. Jump to you.
And a lot of that is resonating, Michael, but I think I take a slightly different look at this. And charity is a word I feels a little cringy to me when we think about ABC. I think ideally this is a social justice effort, right? That
Mm.
best case scenario would be that we are investing in schools and communities, that we don't have to pluck men and women of color out of their communities and educate them elsewhere. That's a much bigger
That's like 100
That's-
years into the future. You know.
But given that, I think this is a piece of it, right? This is what we can do in our place right now with the time and the treasure and the talents that we have in this town. And it is a huge gift. But to see it as charity makes it transactional, like that we're getting something, we're there's a product. I think if we can keep it relational, that these are enriching, these students are enriching our town and our experience and our lives, just as we are enriching them. And it's got to be a balance, or it gets wonky either way. But to say, this is more about justice. This is doing our piece to do right by these young men. We wish we could do more, and we're going to do more. And that we all have a hand in this. You know, Jelani introduced me, I'm a youth minister, but every time I show up at a church, I say, like, I'm not the only one that does this work. We all have to be youth ministers, or it's not going to work. I think we all have to have a hand in ABC, right? So to make it something that the whole town is a part of, and whether they're showing up and participating on house cleanup days, or they're writing a check, or you're going home and talking to your kids about why it's maybe a sad thing that we have to have a program like this, and also the giftedness of it and the amazing opportunities of a program like ABC, and how we get to be allies. And so how do we train all of our peers and the students that the scholars are going to spend most of their time with, right? They're in school and on the sports fields and in the activities, most of their time with peers. How do we make sure that they are on the pages that the adults are? And I think that's a way that this can be a whole town project, and shift it out of a charitable realm into this is an endeavor. This is a movement that we all get to be a part of.
Absolutely. And Polly, we'll jump to you.
That was so beautifully said, Caroline. I love that. And in the end, I was trying to think, was I a board member? Was I an ally? Was I a friend? In the end, charity, I never thought, oh, I'm doing charitable. To me, it's kind of cringeworthy, but I don't know if I'm ready to say social justice. That I love where you're going, but I have to think about that. But certainly anyone who does the kind of work we all do, that we love, knows, and in the end, really, it is selfish. We get, like, if Daryl or Jelani or Shamil, I could go back and name names, Elijah, in the end, on Mother's Day, when I get a text, or what draws us to people like you, Jelani, is not just your color or that you came from a background different from where I live. What draws us to you is that you were motivated to change your life. You wouldn't have done this. So it's much more important to work with someone like you, or it's much more meaningful to me than to work with somebody who's just going through life and pretty happy and doesn't care where they're going or wants their parents to give it to them. So if you get into this charity work, it doesn't become charity. It becomes a relationship between people. There's nothing more exciting than being with people who want to grow and want to improve. And that's what you are in the ABC house. This whole group of 8 boys who may all choose different directions, but you are motivated to change your life, and therefore a little more open if Polly has some advice or Mike wants to talk to you than maybe the average teenager. And that's so fulfilling that in the end, we get more than we could ever give. So
my last question here is, how can the community of New Canaan and other adults connected with ABC better uplift the program? Let's start with you, Michael.
Well, I think there's different levels of things. So I think there are things that are going on at the board, and we've referenced the current board president. There's another dozen or whatever board members, and I think they've already, based on own initiatives and feedback from you guys, have started to do things to make changes. More representation of people of color on the board, some younger voices on the board, changes in program. One of the things that was talked about a lot, and I apologize again, I'm a little bit off your target question, but there was a lot of conversation around the one strike rule, and we changed that. and we recognize that people are going to, you know, make mistakes, and, you know, what you do about it, how you learn from it, is what counts. We still have restrictions, and there's still things that you can't, you know, let slide by any means, but and it's never going to be the same as somebody's kid, because, you know, you can't exit them from your family. But we've said, right, we have to do things differently. So I think, you know, getting more feedback, like we have in very recent times here from the alums is really valuable. So I think that's a change that can make people do better and be better for the program. The town, I think some of the stuff you're doing with the New Canaan public school system is a real step in the right direction. I think if, you know, Susan and I have been exchanging correspondence, you know, how can we make the New Canaan High School administration more aware, you know, how do you, of needs of people, what's going on. I mean, some of the stories were really cringe-worthy from the guys in terms of, you know, even if they were being innocuous, they were just stupid things that people said or did. And you're just like, really, how could that happen?
Well, I mean, it can happen because when you have a lack of training of how to handle situations like that, that's what happens.
A lack of exposure, right, is a big part of it, right? If you've never, you know, again, I grew up in New York City. You know, there's 150 different nations of people represented in New York City. You can't say you never saw something. I guess you grew up in Fairfield County and say you never met anybody like X. But even so, you should, you know, how does this happen? And what role do the parents play? A lot, but we're not getting to, you know, 5,000 parents very easily. So what role does the administration play? What can the teachers do? Some of the stories about the English teachers, when, you know, you got Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer assigned, and they're letting students get away with stuff. You know, here's my opportunity to say something inappropriate because I'm just reading the text, right? Well, you know, figure that out ahead of time. You know, set the ground rules for the students as to, you know, how we're going to handle things like that, or when incidents come up. So I think there are a lot of things that could be done. The easiest ones are at the program itself, and I think Susan and the board are already starting on that, and hopefully we'll see some real impact there. The high school's probably next, and the town's probably last. It's hard to change, you know, a 20-something thousand person town.
Of course. Caroline, I'm going to jump to you. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think piecing together some comments that have been made, I think training for every adult who's going to interact with students, right? And that's ambitious because, gosh, there's parents driving you home from theater practice or football practice, but damage can get done in those car rides, right? And so how do we uplift every adult who's going to be in your lives? Is there a little bit of a screening or a background test or like a little bit of online training? We just say, can you do this module if you're going to be a driver, if you're going to be I think just arming and equipping everyone that we know is going to be around you, right? We're not going to try to insulate or make a little bubble around our students. That's not the goal, but just to know that the people we're putting in your lives are trained. I think then I keep resonating with this upstairs, second and third floor of the house. I was a tutor that was in the house my year, and we moved all the tutors out of the house. I think that's helpful. But there was this like convivial, it's like a train, you know, a train station, like people are in and out, and that was great. And they're board members, and there was energy around that. But thinking back on it, it did mean that you had to be on, that you had to perform a little, right? That you had to,
a little, yes, a lot.
And I'm not, yeah, and I experienced that, and I got to like close my room and be away. But what was it like to know that could happen all the time? And for me as a teenager in high school, home was home. People weren't dropping by, and there is this giftedness that it's the community house, and everyone's got their hands in it, and it's a mix. And I think the RDs and the board can find the right mix for maybe Mondays and Tuesdays are drop-in hours, and then dinner the rest of the week is like, nah, this is us, it's our family time. And I think maybe they've already tracked in that direction, but just really thinking about how to set parameters so that it's not a fishbowl, right? That you don't live in this house that's in the center of town on top of the hill where these 8 young men, like everyone gets to peer into it. We want it to be both of the community, but also your own little community. And I think there's ways to hit that balance.
And Polly, will wrap up with you.
What was the question? I get so busy listening to Carolyn. I think she has great ideas.
No, how can the community of New Canaan and other adults connected with ABC better uplift the program?
Well, I think you got your answers, and that is, as Michael said, it starts with what we talked about, Mike, about the house, the RD. I don't even know who the current RDs are. They might be fantastic, but I do think what we're saying here, it's so funny. It's all things that I've learned from Future 5. We do, with our volunteers, we do a background check. We have some training. I mean, we've got 100 volunteers, so we have to for libel. But there are some very simple systems that we have discussed here today, from who the RD is and what the requirements are. I think we're talking about within the house, because if the house works, then the ripples will emanate through the town. If the house is not happy, it doesn't matter what you do in the town. So I will go with what Mike and Caroline said, and it's a little more training. I think there's some things that I would love to talk about that we do at Future 5 for kids like you guys, but who maybe don't have families that even would get them to apply to an ABC. It's so amazing to me that 15 minutes from New Canaan is a 5,000 high school students, of which 50% qualify for free lunch and reduced lunch, and how similar, and there's probably some ways things we do, and also that connection you were talking about is being able to see other people like you. So this whole weekend has been filled with thousands of ideas, and to me the most important is that we all get together, download them, and look at our notes.
And then one suggestion I'd like to just throw out to the group is also that, like, at a certain point, you become a part of these boys' lives, right? And so it's hard at a certain point to say, all right, wash my hands, I'm done, I'm gonna move on. I've left the board, I'm now done with this program. I think I was talking to my Hopes mom last night that anyone who's kind of been in any corner of this program in this town has a responsibility to always be there, to always be a part of the program, no matter what. And I think this weekend has reminded me that is our duty and that is our calling. Thank you guys so much for joining me on